Hey guys, welcome back to AP Wargaming and Terrain. Today's episode, let's use some old miniatures. I got these old miniatures my dad gave me, I don't know, like 15 years ago or something like that. And they've been hiding in a box for a really long time. And I've never really known what to do with them, mostly because I didn't want to ruin them, because these are like circa 1983, like these are some old miniatures, like the early days of casting. They don't look half bad. Some of them are pretty messed up. You can't really see any of the features and stuff like that on them. So I figured these right here would make perfect statues. So I wanted to make not like a single statue setup. I wanted to have like a larger module piece that could be moved around the board for like cover and stuff like that. So today we're gonna put some old school miniatures on some statue podiums and see how this works out. So let's go ahead and go to the table. Okay guys, so first thing I wanted to start off with was I've got some 1/4 inch like subfloor basement insulation, and it only comes in 1/4 inch sheets. I've got a little bit left from, I don't really remember where I got it, but I wanted to use some of that, and I also wanted to use some of my foam core, and wanted to use some just regular XPS here. So we got all kinds of different foam going on in this build. So I think I like this. I like how this turned out. And don't worry, I am going to show you the process and everything. This is just my test piece, because that's what I do. So really, with this 1/4 inch stuff, I just cut out a piece and drew in my lines and everything like that. Now I like 1/2 inch tile. This is what I decided to do on the flooring section. And as you can see, I'm working on a more realistic looking cracked floor. I may throw up a picture right about here somewhere of actual cracked floor tiles, which, you know, most people do like the lightning zigzag kind of motion, which isn't how floored tile actually cracks. It cracks mostly in straight lines. It's not very often that they crack in a curve or something like that. So I'm working on that, and I hope that'll turn out really good. But we'll show you a little bit more on that stuff too. So what we decided to do for the pillars is I just took a 1 inch block here of XPS, and I roughed it up, some tinfoil, tapered the edges and everything with my nail files, and then we're gonna do capstones and bottom stones on these as the foam board. And I think it looks pretty interesting. I might have to try to add some more decorative stuff to it to kind of pull it away from just looking like a straight block of stone. But that's how we're gonna do things. I'm gonna grab that 1/4 inch XPS and we'll come back to you and we'll start working on this floor. Okay guys, so I cut a strip of this stuff out. It's just hold it up to our piece, and we're just gonna cut a strip of it out that fits about where we want it. And then, well, let's get rid of this little edge right here. These cuts don't need to be straight, because we are going to rough up all the edges. So the more messed up this is the better it's going to look. So we're just going to take our ruler and we are going to mark out our 1/2 inch. Alright, so now that we got those, we're just gonna connect all these lines with a straight piece or ruler, and then we're gonna do the lines that run sideways. I'm gonna get that done and we'll come back and we'll move on to the next step. Alright guys, so we got all the lines drawn in, and now we're gonna start texturing in these bricks. You just need an X-Acto knife, and this is just like the last video, the ruined building, that we're going to put slight cuts into all of this and we're going to run a pin through it. But one thing that I learned over the week is that if you only drag the pin in one direction, it kind of pulls like these edges that you're running along towards the same direction, and it kind of rounds out and stretches out these corners. So the thing that I learned over the week was to go drag it one direction and drag it back the other direction, and that kind of fixes that so that we don't get the curved bend that goes with it. And it looks a bit weird in my opinion, so that's definitely something I'll be doing from now on. So all this is just drag your X-Acto knife through here on these, and then you're gonna take a pin and drag it through here. Now you get a little bit closer. You see how these edges have kind of been pulled down with the stroke. Now if we go back the other direction, see how they disappeared, or they reformed back into the straight line that we needed them to be. So make a couple of passes with that, be a little rough about it, because we are just gonna mess up this floor anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do all that and we'll be right back. Alright guys, we did that. Floor's starting to come together. It's got a lot of depth to these tiles. You run that pin in there quite roughly, and this is about what you'll end up with. And all of our tiles are straight lined and there's no little bends and folds and stuff. I mean, you'll get a few, but that's okay. I mean, it is going to be a ruined floor inside of a building kind of situation, so it doesn't really matter. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our little pliers and we're gonna do the same exact thing that we did in the ruined building build. We're just going to pull these tiles apart, and I have kind of decided that my pillars are going to sit within these three little tiles right here in this 1-inch section. So that gives me all of the outer layer of tiles are the ones that I want to mess up. I want to leave this block of 3 inside the center alone. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. We got all the flooring ripped out, so now the next step is an easy one. We're just gonna basically mash the crap out of this thing with a tinfoil ball. I'm not gonna show you that. You guys know how to do that. It's super simple. So I'm gonna get that done and we'll be right back. Alright, so we got the floor all textured up. I glued it onto our board off camera. You can see it just a little bit right there. I just use tacky glue. I like tacky glue better than PVA glue because it holds on to stuff better in my opinion. So I glued that down to the board, just centered it up right where it needed to be, and then threw some of my random stuff on top of it just to keep some weight on it and keep it flat. So while we're waiting on that, we're gonna texture up our little pillars here. Now, it's just the same as the flooring. You just take a tinfoil ball, just roll it all over it, you know, be pretty rough with it. These are gonna be some old statues, so there's no reason for it to be pretty. And just get a nice bit of texture on there. And once you've gotten all that texture on there, you want to take your nail file here, and you're gonna bevel out these edges to where they're rolled and not sharp, and then put some nicks in there with the side of it. You just put the corner in there and just drag it along. All of these things I've gone over in the ruined building build, so if you want a little bit more detail in on that, I'd go watch this link right here, and it gets a little bit more into that on that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna texture all these up, get them ready and everything like that while we're waiting on this flooring bit to dry. And once all of that is dry and I'm done with these, we'll come back and we'll start talking about the headstone and the footstone for these pillars. Okay guys, so we got those pillars all mashed up. They're looking pretty good. So now, before we start gluing all the pillars and everything on, I want to talk a little bit more about how we're doing these cracks on the floor. So I showed that picture of the cracked tiles, and we'll put it up here again just so you can take a look at it. And if you can see in that picture, a lot of the tiles, they're straight cracks. They go right across the tile with just a couple of intersecting cracks, but for the most part they all kind of go the same direction. Now, a lot of people use the like lightning bolt look for cracked floors, which is not realistic, but on this channel we're not going for super realism, but I've never really liked the lightning bolt look for cracked tiles, so I started doing a little bit of research and looking into what stone tiles actually look like when they're cracked from being used or when things get dropped on them and stuff like that. So this is kind of what we got going on right now. It's just a bunch of straight lines that kind of intersect with each other in random places, but for the most part they're all kind of going in the same direction. So we're gonna put our pillars in even spacing away from each other, and it's gonna be about 2 inches away from each other on this floor. So we're gonna have one like right here, and then one that's right here, and then one that's right here. So now what I want to do is I want to crack most of these tiles, but I'm going to avoid doing it in the sections where those statues would be, because people wouldn't have been walking that close to those statues. They would have been standing a bit a ways to admire the statue. So most of our cracked tiles are going to be these outside ones. I'll probably throw 1 or 2 in here in the center just to break up this section being like perfect tiles compared to the outside section. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'll show you how I was doing that, and let's see, so we'll avoid that. We'll do the one right here, Now I'm just taking my knife and just cutting in some lines here. And we'll do one that goes over here. So really, that's it. That's all you need to do, just a couple of lines. And I'm gonna use a Sharpie. I like Sharpies when I do stuff like this because the acid that's in this ink actually eats the styrofoam just a little bit before it dries, which is gonna help us separate on these cracks and stuff like that. So just drag it in here. It doesn't matter what direction you go. We're looking for regularity anyways. And then I'm just gonna color in where this crack is at so I can get the marker to help me make these cracks a little bit more prominent. So that's how I'm gonna do all these crack tiles on both of these pieces. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna finish this one up, and we'll be back and I'll show you the finished product on all of the crack tiles. So we'll see you guys in a bit. Alright guys, so we got all the cracks put in there. I didn't want to go too overboard on it, but I think it looks pretty good. Hopefully this technique works out when it comes to painting and all the dry brushing and stuff like that, and hopefully these really pop out. So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna make all of the headstones and the floor stones for all of these pillars. Now, this is foam core. It is just the, whatever this is, the 1/4 inch or just the normal foam core stuff. This is not the cheap stuff. I would recommend you buy the cheap stuff. I just happened to get a really good deal on like 5 or 6 boards for like a couple of bucks. So this is the stuff where if you see that the paper just doesn't want to come off of this stuff, which is gonna be good for like the house builds and stuff. But so just take all the paper off of these, and you just take your tinfoil ball and you rough them up. On the floor pieces, the ones that are gonna glue to the base here, you don't need to rough up the bottom part of it. It's just gonna help with all the gluing and stuff like that. But you'll want to do the top here. Now with not this one. With the top pieces, it's exactly the same thing. Oh, right. Should probably tell you the size, shouldn't I? These are 1 1/4 inch square. I went with 1 1/4 inch because it's going to give us just a little bit of overhang on our inch pillars here. You can see just a small bit of overhang. So that's going to help separate those two. And with the top pieces, again, you don't need to texturize the part that you're going to glue to the pillar. It doesn't really need it. But for the top and the sides, just make sure they get all roughed up and stuff like that. If you want to do any more texturing to them, perhaps like break some pieces off, which I might do at some point before we start painting, just to give them a little bit more of an ancient feel to them. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm gonna do that. Alright guys, so we got everything glued down. It's still a little wet, a little tacky, so I'm not gonna be messing with them too much here. But while we were waiting on these to dry, took our miniatures outside, and see if I can get close enough to you there. Just took them outside and I spray painted them gold. And I'm gonna probably use like a Reichling Flesh Shade wash on there just to dirty them up, make them look a little bit older than they are old, so let's make them look older. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add our rubble and our texture and stuff on the bases here. Now at this point, after the glue is dried, if you want to rough up these edges a little bit more, tear some pieces off and stuff like that, is probably something that you'd want to do now, because once all of the glue and everything for the basing and everything is dry, then we're actually gonna do our protective coat of Mod Podge and black paint just to harden everything up a bit, and then we're gonna get on to painting. So you'll want to do any more of the tearing it up or rubbling our pillars up anymore, you want to do that now. So let's go ahead and we're gonna start with doing our rubble. I like tacky glue. You guys know I like tacky glue. I don't prefer PVA glue over tacky. So I'm gonna take a bunch of this, I'm gonna smear it all over the base and be pretty liberal about this because I want everything to stick nice and good, and I'm not gonna have to worry about that. So I'll do this little corner right here for you guys just so you can see what I'm doing. So give me just a second here, work with this, here we go. See, I'm getting quite a bit on there. Not really worried about excess or too much or anything like that, because I want all of this stuff to hold on here really well. And it's okay if you get it up on the tiles. We're not too worried about that because we can get some sand and some grit and stuff like that up on there, and it'll make it look a little bit better. Okay, let me get this glue off my fingers. So now we're gonna take our rubble bits and we're just gonna drop them on there. Press them in, make sure that they stick nice and good. You don't have to go overkill with this. I'm probably put too much on here. That's okay. Now I'm gonna use our other stuff that we always use, and this is a Woodland Scenic aggregate. Get yourself a flock box. It definitely helps keeping things from getting all dirty. Now we're just gonna drop some of this on there. You don't need to press this stuff in because it'll all stick to your fingers. We're gonna worry about that later. And then I've got some other stuff that I like to use. It's not quite sand, but still pretty small. I just toss that in a couple of little places here. And then I've got all my sand, which is, I mean, this is my catch-all cup. So it's got some of the rocks in it, it's got some of my snow flocking in it, it's got sand in it, it's got pieces of styrofoam, little chunks of wood, it's got everything in it. So I like to use this to cover the mass majority of the base. Usually I pile this stuff on here like this and I'll let it set for a couple of minutes, and just so that it gets a real good thick coat of this stuff. But just for now, you know, and that's it. This whole base is gonna look like that. And don't worry about your miniature standing on this stuff, because they're gonna be able to stand on it. It's not that big of a deal. They might have a little bit of issues if you're barely on the base, but for the most part, this This is kind of leveling it out a little bit and making it all into one cohesive piece. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna get this base done, I'm gonna get the next base done, and then we'll go over how we're gonna seal everything just a little bit more before we do the Mod Podge and black paint to get all this sealed and get ready for paint. So we get all this done. All right, guys, so we're almost done here letting these dry. I'm a pretty impatient person, so I'm probably not gonna wait much longer before I start painting these. And so far they're looking pretty good. I tested some of my miniatures on there just to make sure that they could stand up, and they can. All these bigger chunks of the XPS, which are the broken floor pieces, they level this piece out pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this all covered in our Mod Podge and black paint, and that's gonna help just protect the styrofoam. Just gonna make it a little bit stronger, because these are gonna be on the board, they're gonna get bumped into, dice thrown at, and everything like that. So we want something that's pretty strong, can hold up to some wear and tear. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna get a big nasty brush that probably doesn't have too many uses left in it, a little bit of water, and I'm gonna start covering this stuff. So whenever I get that done and they're dry, we'll come back and we'll start talking about all the painting. All right, so we got these things all Mod Podged up and they're dry now, so we're gonna start working on getting all the gray on there. And I'm just using a cheap acrylic paint as always. This one's called charcoal. I'm gonna cover the whole thing. All right, guys, so our gray is dry. I'm not gonna worry about doing a second coat. I know it looks a little splotchy, but what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a black wash on the whole thing, and then we are going to do a heavy dry brush of this gray color, the charcoal, back over it to cover up all of the splotchiness of the paint job. And by doing a heavy dry brush, we're gonna... All right, guys, so we went outside, sprayed all that down with that black wash, and I've got to say, putting your black wash in a spray bottle has got to be the most ingenious thing ever. It took me like 5 seconds to spray this whole thing down, wait for it to dry, and then I sprayed it all over again. Definitely a time saver. I would definitely recommend you going to buy a little spray bottle. Like I said, they're like $2 for one. It was super cheap. So now that that's all done, we're gonna take the same gray that we used for the base coat and we're gonna do a heavy dry brush on it. So we'll do a little bit of that here right now, show you what I mean by a heavy dry brush. So you just kind of get the paint all up in your brush and get most of it off. Took too much of it off. And that's really it, guys. It's a heavy dry brush. Go back over everything. See, makes a huge difference. Leaves all the wash and the cracks and everything like that. Makes this piece look really good. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna finish all this up and we'll come back, and hopefully by then I will decide what I'm going to do with the floor. So we'll see you guys in a bit. Okay guys, so we finished all of that and I believe I've decided what to do with the floor here. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this really dark purple, it's called grape, and I'm gonna heavy dry brush onto the floor tiles. Now how I'm gonna handle all of the broken pieces is, I think if I just pick out the flat spots and paint them purple, they're gonna look like part of the floor tiles, because they wouldn't have actually been like a through and through color. It would have just been painted on the top of the floor tiles. So I think that's how that's gonna work. I'm pretty sure that either this is gonna work or I'm going to immediately regret it. So we're just gonna go ahead and do that right now on camera and see what happens. I don't think it looks too bad. I mean, I'm not gonna fill it in 100%. It won't be a full coverage, so a lot of the gray will still be sticking through. But I think I'm gonna enjoy this the way it looks with our gold miniatures on these podiums with some purple tint to all of our tiles. I think that's gonna look pretty good. Not to mention we're gonna add a couple of little things on the front of these pillars, like little nameplates out of some cardstock or something, just to give a little bit more to this piece. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna finish this, and when I come back, we'll get on to the next point. Okay guys, so we finished the last couple of final steps, and that was we needed to dry brush on some tan, and I made these little nameplates out of some cardstock. Also glued the statues on there. So now all we need to do is we need to add our snow, and I'm probably just gonna add a couple of like little dead grass tufts and stuff like that, which I make my own. On those I use an old house brush, just clip off some pieces, throw some tacky glue on there, and just stick them in. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna finish this. Here you go. Super simple. It only took a couple of hours, minus the dry time, of course. But I think they turned out pretty well. Throw some pictures up here for you guys to see. I used the camera this time and not my phone, so hopefully that works out. So I was reading in the Frostgrave book last night, and actually these statues would work pretty good for the living museum. Unfortunately, they're not detachable miniatures. You probably could do something like that with some magnetic strips and stuff like that, but that's just not something that I do. I just like making larger, pretty pieces to look at. So one thing that I did want to mention is I did start a Patreon page last night. Unfortunately, because of some new rules in the YouTube, you have to be a part of their YouTube partner situation in order to actually throw that kind of those links up on the end screen, which will be up here in just a little bit. But there is a link for my Patreon page in the description below this video. So if you guys would like to support and help out the channel, that is a great way to do that. By no means pressured into doing any of that. I'm gonna keep making videos regardless. I enjoy doing this. So final thoughts here, guys. I like the way these turned out. I probably would have done the floor coloring a little bit differently, maybe spend a little bit more time on that, trying to bring out the separation in the tiles and the cracks and everything like that. But for what they are and how long it took, they turned out really well. And I think they're gonna be a really pretty piece on the table. So we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna call it quits here. This turned out to be a kind of long-ish video. I know that the last one, the finishing part of the ruined building, was a really long video, and I know that I lost a lot of views because of that. So I'm gonna try to start keeping my videos within like the 30-minute range for you guys at home, so you don't have to dedicate an entire hour just to watch videos from my channel. So we're gonna start a little bit of restructuring in that kind of sense, maybe stay more towards the build as opposed to the painting, because I'm not a great painter to begin with. I just do all the simple techniques just like everybody else does. So I think that's probably the way we're gonna go on that stuff. So anyways, as always, like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe and share. Don't forget, at least go visit the Patreon page, come back, let me know what you think, and we'll see you this time next week.